And we're recording. So,
good morning, everyone.
Jeremiah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our virtual spring seminar. Hopefully everyone fared well after the stormy evening we had in much of Wisconsin last night. I ask you bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties. We are not professionals. I would like to mention that our second workshop, Solving the GIS Puzzle in NG 911 with presenter Sarah Rollins, begins at 1 p.m. later today. Tune in at about 12:50 for announcements and introductions. I would also like to mention that our morning session tomorrow begins at 8:50 a.m. The first 10 minutes are designed to let you get situated and make sure your setup is working, and allows us to share some announcements. In between sessions on Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon, we will have some polls and facts to share with you, as well as information about our Platinum sponsors. Without our Platinum sponsors, we would not be able to provide you these enhanced experiences. Thursday evening will consist of some social night events. One is a happy hour hosted by our first presenter, Frank Conkling of Panda Consulting. So be sure to join us for that. And then later on that evening, we will have a trivia contest. There are prizes donated by our Platinum sponsors, Grafe, Ayers, and GPI, gift cards ranging from $25 to $50 for the top 4 finishers. So if you haven't signed up for that, please consider it. Finally, on Friday, we will be having special interest group meetings on SIG Day. SAGIC, MUG, and Women in GIS will meet that day. Our spring event will culminate with our monthly WLA board meeting, which is open to anyone who would wish to tune in and check it out. If you enjoy the sessions and workshops the WLA has hosted in this event, please consider donating to the WLA Foundation, Incorporated. There is a link to do so on our spring virtual meeting information page. This is a way of trying to recoup the lost ability to fundraise with a raffle during this virtual meeting. So please consider donating the money. It goes to the Damon Anderson Memorial Scholarship Fund. And remember, it's for the kids. And with that, I will also thank our entire board for their efforts in helping put this on. A special thanks goes to the members of the Education Committee. And with that, I would like to turn things over to our Spring Education Chair, Jason Poser. He's put in countless hours over the last few weeks to prepare for this virtual event. Thank you very much, Jason, for your efforts to forge ahead with conducting an event. Now we will begin to see the fruits of our labor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'd like to thank again the board and the Education Committee for supporting me in designing this particular event. It has been an adventure with all the issues and troubles that the world is going through at the moment. This being our first virtual event for the WLA has been a very trying and difficult time, but that's okay. We are doing the best to prevent content and continuing the networking for our industry and our state. So I really don't have much more to say than that, other than what Jeremy has alluded to as far as how our event is being laid out. If you have any questions, please contact us and we will do our best to reach out to you and answer your questions in a timely manner. Enjoy the event. We have, again, the workshops today and the content starting tomorrow. And then we have our SIG meetings on Friday. With that, I will launch it off to Frank Conkling, our first workshop presenter. Frank, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So this is parcel mapping differences between ArcMap Parcel Fabric and ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. And this is going to be a little bit different from most of the webinars that you might come into. It's more, we're trying to do this more of a workshop. And so hopefully we can, we can succeed in this. Those of you who have been in our weekly workshops understand sort of how this works and such. So just, I think almost everyone here knows who Panda Consulting is. We've got clients all across the US, Esri business partners since 1998. I find a lot of people are a little surprised when I say that I actually was a beta tester on ArcView 1. ArcView 1, and we've been using Esri products for that long. Professional surveyors in Florida and South Carolina, taught surveying and mapping at our local college, past president of Florida Association of Cadastral Mappers, and currently a member of the Florida Board of Professional Surveyors and Mappers. All right. So I want to introduce you just a little bit to the interface, just so if you haven't used it before, you understand how it's supposed to work and such. You will see the webcams popping up every once in a while. We are going to purposely only keep 2 webcams active at the time, myself and Chris, and everybody else. I hope you don't mind, but we're going to turn off your webcams. And once we get started, we actually will mute most of the mics, only because we wind up with getting a lot of background noise. Whether we realize it or not, there's a lot of things going on in our places where we're at right now. So we mute those, and we'll ask that you use the chat window, and use the chat window to go and communicate with us, and you can actually use the chat window to communicate with one another. So the webcams, again, if you just make it so that just the active cameras are shown, you'll only see those 2 active cameras on here. If you go and look at the interface, you will see there's a sort of an icon with some people in it that will show you who's actually in the conference at the moment. I'm looking right now, we have 31 people here already.
32 now.
32 now, thank you. So also right next to that is the chat window, and it will show you any ongoing chats in there. And if you look down on the bottom, it's where you type in your actual chat that you want to go and communicate. And also there's a pull down here, whether or not you send that chat to everyone, or whether you can specifically send it to any one person there, so you can have a private chat between you without us seeing any of your comments. By the way, the chats do not get recorded, but we are recording the audio, and we're recording everything that's being shared on the screen. The webcams do not get recorded. All right. If you are having any problems, the gear or the setting icon will go and show you both your audio settings and what's on there, and you can turn them on and off. And that's it for introduction. So what we want to do is sort of share with you our goal for this workshop. It is a little different than those of us that normally have in-person workshops. We want to make this an interactive learning experience. All right. We don't want me just throwing information at you. We want to make this interactive as much as possible. We want you to ask questions. We're only going to have a few slides. Matter of fact, I think I've only got 2 more slides after this. So it's mostly going to be a conversation between us. It's not a workshop. It's a workshop. It's not a webinar. All right. Webinars where somebody shows you slides and just talks through them. You must ask questions, and use the chat window first. And if you've got a long question, we'll unmute you and you can ask it over audio. And Chris, who's right next to me on the webcam, he actually will moderate. He'll be watching the chat windows and making sure that I get stopped and make sure that we address all of these issues that are in there. Chris, you want to go and talk so that we can understand, everybody knows what your voice sounds like?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Conkling. If it wasn't apparent already, I'm Frank's son. I know we look a lot alike. Yeah, as Frank said, I'm going to be moderating this workshop. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat window. I'll relay them to Frank. As we all know, or anyone that is familiar with Frank's presentations, he can get a little caught up sometimes. So by feeding your questions into the chat, I'll be able to interject and make sure he gets those answered.
Great, great, thank you. All right, so what are we going to do today? So our schedule is we're supposed to go from 9 o'clock in the morning, which is right now, till around noon. And we'll have, I think, at least one break in here. It depends upon, when people ask, and can we have a break and stuff. Not quite sure when it will be, but we'll have a break anyway, so you don't have to listen to me for 3 straight hours. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and talk about these 2 different approaches to mapping parcels. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to review the structures, because structurally there are some big changes in here, and they approach this differently. So we want to review the structures. We want to understand how this works on here. Then we're going to go over the main workflows associated with parcel mapping and compare. It will be purely compare and contrast. It will be first I'll do it in one, then I'll do it in the other, and then we'll have a little discussion between them, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to do a combine, or what's commonly called a merge. Then we're going to go and map a meets and bounds parcel and deal with making sure that it fits within the framework, and then making sure that we do a clip out from underneath there, those sorts of things. And then we're going to go and map an aliquot split. An aliquot split, by the way, for those of you who may not be familiar with that word, aliquot is a French word meaning portion of. All right, so you've got a lot of descriptions which say we want a certain portion of this other parcel. So we're going to go and map that and show you a couple different approaches to that, how ArcMap Fabric uses it, and then how ArcGIS Fabric does. Then we're going to go and take and map a plat of survey that we've been working with, going through the entire process. First going and mapping the plat, then mapping the lots, and then mapping the tax parcels, and finishing it all the way through. Then we're going to do and map a certified survey map, a CSM, and do exactly the same thing. And finally, if time is permitting, we're going to go and look at correcting some issues with the data to see what it's like to correct something in ArcMap Fabric and what it's like to correct it in ArcGIS Fabric. Any questions so far? All right.
yet.
All right. So after that, in fact, will be the workshop later on at 2 o'clock. All right. With that, by the way, that's all the slides. That's all the slides you're going to see from me today. So with that, let's start examining the structures and why these two are so different, and what that means for us when we're actually mapping it. And what we're looking at right now is ArcMap, and specifically an ArcMap Parcel Fabric inside of here. And what we should know is that the ArcMap Parcel Fabric has actually been around for well over 10 years now. So it's a very mature product. Matter of fact, there's been very little development on it in the past year or so, as the focus has been over on ArcGIS Fabric. But it is mature, and it's something that we've all sort of learned to deal with and learned to work with, and it looks familiar. But I want to, again, for those people that may not be familiar with it, I want to go over what the structure looks like and how they store things and how things are interacting amongst one another. So one of the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the structure itself. And inside of our catalog, it looks like just sort of a grouping of layers. And if we expose that, we actually see that the parcel fabric actually only consists of 6 elements that are exposed to us. There's actually more that are hidden, but we have one layer which stores all of the control points. Then we have another layer which stores these things called line points. Line points are basically where a corner or a parcel corner is supposed to be contiguous with a line. They're supposed to be on a line. And these are created by the system, not by you. And then we have one where we have all of the lines that are stored in the parcel fabric are stored in that parcel fabric underscore lines layer. And then finally, we have parcels. Now, parcels is every single polygon inside of the parcel fabric is stored inside this one feature class. Then we have one thing called plans. Plans is actually a reference table. And if you look at the icons here, it's neither points nor lines nor polygons. It's an actual just reference table. It has no geometry associated with it. And it's supposed to be a place to store the document that created that parcel. Then finally, we have parcel fabric points. Points are different from control points inside of the ArcMap fabric in that points are looser. They are meant to represent the ends of lines. And a little secret is that points actually control where everything is located on here. control points are out there as a reference, and they are in the fabric, but they're really not part of the fabric. They are used as a reference. They're used to go and sort of control the coordinate values for everything around them. All right, so then the question becomes, well, if you have this one layer of nothing but polygons, how can I split that out? And the reality is that in the table of contents, you'll see actually, here's your control points, here's your line points, here's your fabric points and your fabric lines, and then everything else below that are actually polygons, but those polygons have definition queries against them. So if we look here and look at the definition query, this layer here, the tax parcels, actually says that the system end date is null and the type is equal to 7. And that should give you your first clue that, in fact, the way that you differentiate between the different types of polygons inside of an ArcMap parcel fabric is by an attribute field called type. That attribute field has a domain on it, and that domain is actually stored in the geodatabase, and it's the type of field. And here are the various types of fields in the local government information model. Type number 1 is a PLSS township, 2 is a section, 3 is a quarter section, 4 is a special survey, 5 is simultaneous conveyances, 6 is conveyance division, 7 is tax, 8 is ownership, 9 is encumbrance, 10 is separated right, and 11 is other. Actually, this definition that came out of it is a result of some work that's been done by some federal committees, and it's sort of documented inside of Nancy von Meyer's GIS and land records book, and that's where they pulled this from. It's a very good data model. However, because it was developed on a federal level, there's always sort of nuances as far as things that don't necessarily fit local. For example, inside of here, there is a thing called a simultaneous conveyance. A simultaneous conveyance is in fact a parcel of land that has been divided by a private landowner so that they could go and split it out. And the simultaneous conveyance part of it is the fact that the way it is defined is by a drawing, a graphic drawing that's stored on local government. It is a subdivision plat. It is a survey of some sort, a plan of how these individual areas inside of there should be split up. And if you go down here and look in the local government information model, there is by default no certified survey map. And I know in Wisconsin, that's one of the areas. Well, in fact, we have included it in this county data model because that's one of the most important ones for them is a certified survey map. So we've also gone and included it. So again, every one of these layers has a definition query defined against it. All right. In this case, the system end date's null, meaning a system end date is another attribute field that we deal with inside of here. And the system end date marks whether or not something is current or something is historic. And then finally, this says, or the type is equal to 7, a tax parcel, or 9, an easement, or 5 or 6, a division inside of simultaneous conveyances. Same thing for cadastral framework. This is current data, so system end date's null, and the type is equal to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. Those were the first 4 types inside that type field. That's the way this works. And then further to break this down, the way things fit together inside of the parcel fabric, the ArcMap parcel fabric, is the fact that the points, the lines, and the polygons are all related to one another. I should actually say the plan tables also all related to one another. And there's actually a series of relationships, and you'll see them over here in our catalog area, where there's a relationship between the parcels and the lines, and a relationship with the plans and the parcels and such. Many of the other relationships are hidden in here. But the way this works is that the line layer, let's go in and open this up just to show it. The line layer has a series of attributes, but most importantly is this first one here. All right. This first one here is the parcel ID. This attribute contains a link. So it tells us that, in fact, this is going to the parcel that has an ID of 1. And as you go down through this, you'll see all the others in here. So this says that this line goes with parcel number 1. And then it says what the sequence is of this line. So this is the first line inside of the one that goes with parcels, and you can see it goes all the way down here. In this case, that's a big parcel. It has 277 lines associated with it. All right. So it first tells us what polygon it goes with, and then it tells us what's the sequence of that polygon, and then it tells us what point does it go with. So this is point number 1 here. So that line starts at point number 1 and it goes to point number 2 is what's happening. And then point 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, so that from the line feature class, you can determine, okay, what parcels, what polygons were created, and then what lines or what points were used with that, and how it all fits together. So the ArcMap parcel fabric has a structure in which the actual structure defines how things fit together. And because this structure is defined as part of the database schema itself, you cannot have just a line inside of an ArcMap parcel fabric. Everything is built around polygons. Polygons have lines, lines have points. So you'll find if you just say, I want to draw a center line, you don't do that. You actually, it all focuses around these polygons and how they relate to one another. And that's both good in that you could easily go and say, well, show me everything that's associated with one individual polygon. So if I go over here, I can do an identify on this parcel. Not there. Let me go down to visible here. I can say this parcel here. Go and show me what lines are actually associated, and these are the lines that are actually associated with that parcel. And I can click on them and I can see them. All right, those are the lines that are associated with that parcel. And then if I actually go on each individual line, I can see, well, here's the point that's associated with that line. So this structure, because it is so constrained, actually goes and stores everything. And again, in a lot of ways, that's good, but there's unseen consequences with that. For example, that means that every single parcel has its own set of lines. All right. So that what happens is you'll have a set of parcels, but suddenly you'll have twice as many, if not more than that, lines in your database, so that it's not uncommon at all for a parcel database to have 50,000 parcels, but to have 1 million lines in it. And as long as the database is kept in good shape as far as those relationship classes, it runs fine. We have clients that have 2 million polygons and have 20 million lines in it, and it works fine. It's the database is bigger, and you've got to make sure that you maintain this as well as possible. So that because of these relationships, again, the parcel IDs, you've got an attribute relationship between the line and the parcel table. And because of the line to the point table, you have to make sure that your attribute relationship classes are well maintained and kept up. And then finally, that the spatial indexes are also maintained. So there's good things and there's bad things about this data structure. Another bad thing about it is that while every polygon, every tax parcel probably should have its own set of lines, because a tax parcel only describes that deed only describes that one parcel. What happens when you have a subdivision or a CSM? Because the way those are created is just with a single line describing the split between the two. Same way with the public land survey systems. They are actually simultaneous conveyances, but they are of a federal level, not a private level. So that they wind up having a lot of extra lines in them, kept on top of one another over and over and over again. So there's efficiencies in the structure, but there's also inefficiencies built in. All right, is there any questions about right now or any comments about the ArcMap parcel fabric before I go to start describing what the ArcGIS parcel fabric looks like? Anything in here? Okay.
Nothing
All
yet.
right. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to ArcGIS Pro, and inside of here, this is the same structure with the fabric inside of ArcGIS Pro. All right. Now this structure is a little different in that rather than constraining the database and saying that you can't have a parcel without a corresponding set of lines. Instead, the approach has been different. That inside of the parcel fabric, inside of ArcGIS, you have what's called a record. And that record actually goes in, let me go here and show you this record, actually is a feature class that has its own set of polygons associated with it. Matter of fact, over here inside of the catalog, you'll see here, it has its own, it's a polygon feature class, and it has a geometry associated with a record. But a record doesn't serve as sort of the gatekeeper for all the lines and everything else associated with it. It has a different purpose. So let's sort of step back and describe ArcMap parcel fabric. The database controlled what you had to have in there in order to create a real parcel. Inside of the ArcGIS parcel fabric, there is no control that you have to have its own set of lines and points, but rather it says, okay, here starts our definition. A parcel should have a polygon, should have lines, and should have points associated with it. And those lines should be on the boundary of the polygon. And those points should be on the ends of those lines. But the difference is, within the ArcGIS parcel fabric, these rules are not enforced. And it's not that draconian control that the ArcMap parcel fabric had. So it says, yeah, you should have these things in there. But what happens is the Pro fabric, this thing here, instead of enforcing it, it checks it. And if in fact you don't have lines for those polygons that you draw or the splits that you make, it creates them for you. All right. So it's a little more of a permissive thing than that major control that's inside the ArcMap fabric. And that the primary centerpiece of all of this is the records feature class. Now, the records feature class, if we look at it again, there's not a whole lot in there. There's a name of it. There's a record type and a recording date, and then there's just general attributes that are seen in the ArcMap structure. But there's not much else. It doesn't say what it's related to, because the relationships are flipped on their head within the ArcGIS structure, the ArcGIS fabric structure. Instead of storing what's related to what, instead, inside of the ArcGIS parcel fabric, it starts out and says, here's a record. And here is the global ID of that record that we're going to go and track things with. And now, when we create something, when we create a feature, when we create a polygon, or when we create a line, we're going to mark that thing that we created with the global ID of the record. All right. But we can also use existing lines. We don't have to go and have a complete set of lines for every single parcel that we have. We can use them over and over and over again, or using some of the terminology that Esri's like to using right now, it is a shared boundary, not necessarily its own separate and discrete boundary. It is shared. So that if I'm creating something off of something else, doesn't mean I have to create a new line to represent the north line of it, but rather I can use the existing line and just have that become part of this reference. The thing that's unique about this is that the record is only stamped on those lines that are created or deleted, not used. So that inside of the ArcGIS parcel fabric, you may not go and do a link and say, show me everything that was used to create this parcel. Doesn't work that way. You can say, show me all the things that are related to this record, but that may not get you everything that was used to create that parcel. So the focus has moved from the parcels to records. And I can share with you that Esri is working on a way to go and track lineage through the use of records. But a record inside of the parcel fabric serves a different purpose than inside of the ArcMap parcel fabric. All right. We're all good with that. Any questions? Okay. Jeremiah, good. Jeremiah just noted that we reached 50 people here. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. All right. So let's start with just some general workflows. And those of you that know me know that when I teach mapping with a parcel fabric, it's usually centering around the basic things that we do. When we do a combine, when we take two parcels and make them one, that's usually called a combine or consolidation, or there's several different names for it across the country. In the functionality of a fabric, it's called a merge. You merge those two together on there. And in order to do that inside of the ArcMap parcel fabric, what you want to do is you want to first start and say, let's start editing. All right, so we start editing this table. And then we go and, using our specific cursor, we can select, let me go make sure that, we can select two parcels. And then I can right click and say merge. Now, the first thing I want to do on here is create a reference, a plan to say how I want to do this. So I'll go to plan and I'll say, let's create a plan. And this will be my merge plan. And I can put all sorts of information in here. I can put the description in, what the format is of it. And in this case, it's a quadrant bearing, degrees, minutes, and seconds, acres. Here I can put all sorts of attribution on there, but it's a plan. And that plan is then used to go and reference anything else that I create with this plan. So I'll set that as my active plan. And then on here, I have a whole series of things that I can check. For example, if I want to create a new number for that plan in the name field, I can type it in here. If I wish to go and use one of the existing ones, I can click on one of these and use this instead. Next option, if I don't want to go, so that's one option there. If I don't want to go and mark these parcels as historic, instead, maybe I'm doing this to just fix something. Maybe they should have been the same, or maybe one of these is a sliver. I can check on this thing here and say, don't mark these original ones that I've selected as historic, just sort of throw them away. That's what this means. All right. And then finally, we have another option down here on the bottom. It says change it to a different template, meaning take these two tax parcels and when I merge them together, make them something else. Make them, for example, maybe a subdivision or CSM polygon instead. So inside of this, what looks like a very simple dialog box, we have a lot of different options on there, right? And those of us that have used this, they're like, okay, I can kind of understand what this is. Well, let me go back over here to ArcMap and do exactly that same thing, all right? So inside of ArcMap, I want to have a record. I need to have a record for this to work. So I can go in here and I create a record. And the record, what do I want to call this? This is my merge record. And I can tell it what type of record it is and what type of, what date it was. But if I look down here, these are exactly the same attribute fields as were on the plan. So I create that plan, or excuse me, I create that record. I now have to go in and say what two parcels do I wish to have merged? So I select those two parcels. The next step is to go and click on the merge tool. And if I look, this is a little daunting because it's a different interface, but I have exactly those same options. I can say, if I wish to go and give it a new name, I could use a template and say, make it a tax parcel, and here's my new name. If I don't wish to give it a new name and use one of the existing ones, I would uncheck this and say, here's the one that I want it to be. I would use those attributes. Maybe just to go back here. So here's the new name. Here's preserve attributes. The next option I have down here is, well, whether I want to delete it or not. Well, over here, if I keep it at new feature, it's going to take the two existing ones, mark them as historic, and create a new one. But if I don't want to do that, I can click on existing feature, and it will go and take the two, merge them together, and delete the old ones. So I have exactly the same option here, whether or not I use new feature or whether I use existing feature for that. That's my other option. That's the same as delete parcels. Finally, I go down here, and if I want to go and change this to a different thing, I want to use a different template, I can tell it that instead I want to merge these into another layer. I want to merge them maybe into a CSM and do that. So if I look and I compare these two functionalities, these really are the same, just very different interfaces on them. Again, here is the interface for merge. And again, going through new parcel or merge it to a new name, merge it using these attributes, merge it and delete the existing ones, or merge it to a different layer, to a different template. Over here, merge it to a new name, merge it to, if I turn this off, merge it to existing ones, keep the original ones or delete them, and then finally merge it to a different structure. Same exact thing. So in this case, I'm going to undo this, say keep my originals, I'm going to merge it to this 0, 0, say merge. All right, it will go and merge that. And over here, if I go and merge it to this, it will go and merge them. Now, the one thing I noticed on here is this line did not disappear. Why did this not disappear? That should have been marked as historic on here. All right. So other differences in here is that this kept the attributes. This did not keep the attributes in here, even though I told it wow, that's interesting. By the way, for those of you that have ever done this in a demo, it's one of those things where it's like, what's going on here? Because you wind up talking so much, you talk yourself into something that actually did merge, didn't it?
Mark says silver polygon made it not merge. Or sliver polygon.
No,
Sliver
actually,
polygon.
I didn't see any sliver polygons in here. It is there. I don't know why I didn't see it right away. It is there. All right, so in here it merged it. And we go to attributes here. Here is the merge, a couple things. It also calculated the area of those two on here. It calculated the area of those two. In this case, I haven't set this up right, but by the way, last night I was like Jason, I was in here doing this. And it's such a new database that it didn't do that. All right, go back here. Let's do this again. Still have this. Go ahead and do a merge to an existing to here. Don't use this to here and merge them in there. In fact, it does that. Still isn't doing that line. All right. And in fact, there's the area that was calculated on there. So the question is, how is it handling those historic parcels? Because if I turn on historic parcels here, I can see there's my 2 parcels on here. All right, and if I actually go and select one of these, I will see that inside of the ArcMap parcel fabric, there's actually 2 fields. One is called a historical field, which is binary. It's a 0 means it's current, 1 means it's historic, and also the system end date field, which marks when this was changed. If I go over to ArcMap and look at the historic polygons, go here and see there is no historical field. Instead, what there is a field called retired by record. And what the retired by record does is that's actually the global ID of this record, which has the merge information on it. So it's referencing everything back to that. So in order for me to figure out when this happened, all right, I could check through and see, okay, when was this modified by Frank? Or I could go through on my merge record and see what's the date on that merge record on there. All right, so they perform the same thing, but different ways of going about it, different workflows on there. There's not a huge difference. The biggest difference I've seen so far is this interface for merge. Getting used to this and knowing what all these different things mean, because it has that same functionality in there. All right, any questions on the merge on here? Nope. Okay.
None yet.
Good, thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to go to a bookmark called Meets and Bounds, which is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to input a Meets and Bounds parcel description and utilize that to go and track a new parcel in here. Right? And in order to do that, my interface is I click on the new parcel, I go to my plan, go to my plan, thank you. I create a new parcel called Meets and Bounds. I then set that as my active parcel. I then go and using this dialog box here, this new parcel dialog box, I use these tools to go and first attribute the polygon and then go to the lines and actually input my lines. It turns out I've actually gone and stored this out here already. So I kind of know and cheated a little bit on here, but I wanted to go and sort of put this in and make sure I did exactly the same thing in both applications. So what this has done is I've actually gone and input and said, you know, the first bearing is north 4551 west for a distance that's going from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, at which point I have a curve. So at 4, this is my chord bearing. My distance is 0, my radius is 300 feet, and my chord distance is 229.61. And then I have a closing line here, and it will tell me that here's my closing, my distance, here's the area that's on here. So the biggest difference is that with ArcMap in here, you have to input everything this way. And you use the tools and the grid, the construction grid for that. On here, everything that you have has to have a bearing and distance on it. Whether it's a calculated bearing and distance, an inverse bearing and distance, or input. It all has to have its own bearing and distance on here. And then you form this network, this geometry of vectors. I'm very careful not to describe this as lines yet, because it's really not lines. It is almost like a sketch used to be in ArcMap, and that it doesn't exist until you actually tell it to go and place this where it's supposed to be, until you tell it join. It's at that time that it actually comes into existence. Right now, it's just a sketch, a boundary. And then I go in here and say, okay, let's keep this boundary and join it. At this point now, I have the ability to go and tell it where this is supposed to go. For those of us that used to be ArcMap parcel mappers, this was sort of, well, you never go and do things out in space. Well, inside of ArcMap, you almost always do things in space and then tell it where it's supposed to go. You want to check on the validity of that boundary. Make sure it mathematically closes. And then you tell where it's supposed to go. And you have two options on here. I've just realized that inside my parcel fabric. Let me go and corrupt that. There it is. I'm going to delete that. So let me do that again. And again, I apologize. I should have checked both of these map documents to make sure that they were all set up correctly. I go in here, I set this, I create a new plan. There's my plan. Make that my active plan. And I'm going to go and load those lines in here. There's the lines. I'm going to say keep it and join it. That should have given me full cartographic. Why am I not? Anyway, I have this option here where I can say, no, I want to take my new parcel and I want to make sure that it fits here and tell it where to go. So it will take the new parcel and adjust it to fit against my existing ones. That's this top option. And I can then go in here and say, that point goes there. And then I can say, that's on that line. This is on this line. That's supposed to be coincident. And that's supposed to be coincident. And it gives me two different colors of these joins. This join is the way that it ensures topology or contiguity. On here is the red ones are when I'm joining to an existing fabric corner. The green ones are where I'm in fact placing it so it's on that line. It creates what's called a line point on there. Another thing you'll notice is that inside the ArcMap fabric, the curve is more than just the actual arc of the curve. And in fact, it is the point of curvature, the point of termination. There's a radius point, and there's two radial lines that are created as part of this. So it's a whole group of them. So if I were joining this and there was another curve that was supposed to be coincident with this, I would actually make sure that I joined my radius point here. But in this case, I'm just going to go and join it to these places, and it will go and adjust the lines. Actually, what it does is it adjusts the points, and then those lines go to those points of make it that's on that corner, that's on this line, this is on this line, this is connects up to this corner, and this connects up to this corner here, and creates this parcel on top of the other one. Now this joining process is one that's very critical inside the ArcMap parcel fabric. And you have to make sure that you pay attention when you're doing it, because that's actually defining where that parcel is supposed to be located. All right, it defines where that parcel is supposed to be located. I can then go in here and say, well, this actually is and I can attribute this as I see fit. I then can go and tell it what I wish to go and clip this out of. All right, or what in ArcMap terminology, I want to create a remainder. I want to clip this out of, in this case, this other larger parcel. All right. So I can click on, go ahead and do the remainder. And it will go and calculate that remainder for me. Here is the remainder parcel, and it calculates what the scale was, what the factor was. If I turn on my historic parcels, I can see that here is my historic parcel. Here is the remainder of it. And those of us that use ArcMap Parcel Fabric, we're very familiar with this workflow. You take and create a meets and bounds description, put it in place, and then you join it, and then you do a parcel remainder on here. Right? Any questions on that? By the way, that parcel remainder gets very tricky, because it turns out that if the parcel that you're clipping it against has any issues with it, then you may get information, for example, the area and such, which aren't valid. You may get misclosures in there. There's a lot of things that are on there that may reflect that there might have been some problems associated with it. If you're clipping against a multi-part polygon, it's also problematic. It will also give you errors on it. So that whole process was never fully worked out inside of ArcMap Parcel Fabric. But for the most part, it was. We sort of, you learned how to deal with that. You didn't keep multi-part parcels inside the fabric. You dissolved them as you were exporting them out. And you always went to check and make sure your misclosures were correct, because misclosure was a big deal on here. Well, inside the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, all right, we're going to try to replicate that same thing again. Are we ready? Any questions on, any comments on the ArcMap Parcel Fabric workflow? It was one of those things that it would work most of the time, and it would work fine. It worked great, and it was a good process to use, as long as you kept and you knew what those little tricky areas were. So now what I'm going to do is, as I created a plan, I'm going to create a record inside of here. All right. And I now have a meets and bounds record. So I'm going to go replicate that. Inside of ArcMap, I clicked on the new parcel. In this case, this is actually sort of new parcel right now. Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw the lines. And on Traverse, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it I'm building tax parcel lines. Now this is interesting, because inside of ArcMap, I had to go and tell it, when I did a new parcel, I had to tell it what type of parcel I was creating in here. All right. Inside of ArcGIS, you don't do that. Instead, what you do is you tell it, here's the types of lines that I'm going to be creating. And because of those lines, it will know, oh, if I create tax lines, then I'm going to be creating a tax parcel. And notice structurally, each of these various layers, the simultaneous conveyance, it has its own set of lines. Conveyance division has its own set of lines. Tax parcels has its own set of lines. So the lines aren't commingled anymore. They're completely separated so that you can say, here's the lines that go with my subs. Here's the lines that go with my lots. Here's the lines that go with my tax parcels. All right. So now I go and I tell it, okay, here is my start point. Well, just as I did with the other, I'm going to go in here and import in this. And in fact, here it is here. Here is the same element here, the same traverse inside of here. And it's input exactly the same way as I did inside of the other grid. Arc lengths, curves, everything. But note, there are no numbering on here because it doesn't keep track of the sequencing. It doesn't care about the sequencing. It just knows, okay, here's your traverse. Brings it in. That is a text file. It's actually the same structure as the ArcMap traverse tool. It's the same exact structure. So here is my lines for my traverse. And by the way, later this morning, we're actually going to input these lines. So I just didn't want to have to spend the time doing that. So now that I'm done with that, I've actually inputted all the lines in here. My next step in building this is going and determining what have I built and does it form a complete polygon. So the first thing I'll often do is I'll say, well, show me the things that I just built, the things that are tagged with this record ID. All right. And it now selected, these are the lines that are part of this record that you just built. And then I'll go in and I say, okay, this does in fact look like it forms a complete polygon. Let me go and check it by creating what's called a seed. A seed is in fact a test. It's a check to see whether or not a polygon is closed, whether or not a set of lines, I shouldn't say polygon, whether or not a set of lines closes back on itself or whether it forms closed areas. Right? That's what the seed does. The seed, once you have a seed, I can then go and say, go ahead and build my active parcel, my active record, and it will go and build it. And in here, here is my built polygon now. All right. So just as before, I can go in here and name it as my parcel ID. All right, and I can do all the attribution. Notice it does not calculate the stated area on here. You actually, because this is in fact intending to be what was shown on that deed. So you actually have to input it. It does in fact mark that this parcel was created by this record here, meets and bounds here. So it uses that global ID. It says, okay, that's here. It's still active. It's not been retired. Here's my misclosure information on here. Here's when I created it. So I now have created a true parcel. It has polygon, has the lines associated with it, and it has the points associated with it. But I can see already that this is not coincident with my existing information. So I have to go and in ArcMap, parcel fabric terminology, I have to join it. I have to align it. So I'm going to align it. Now what the align function does is it goes and takes and draws a buffer. In this case, this is a 5-foot buffer and it shows it. If I uncheck this, it hides it. This is the buffer and this is what it's going to go and go through. I'm going to go in here and manually go and do some things. For example, I'm going to say that I actually have started here and I wish to go and maintain that point exactly there. All right. And then I could go in, zoom to all these other areas and say, add a link and say that I wish to adjust this point to there. All right, and it will create that. It will actually show me the distance for that point, how far off it is and how far off it's going to be moving. I also can do the same thing here where I want it to go to that point and it'll show me it's 2 foot off. And here I can create my link. And in here I can create my link. So this is analogous to doing that join. And in this case, whatever is selected is going to be adjusted to fit those surrounding parcels that are not selected. So I could actually go and change my selection and toggle between this and the other ones, depending on which I felt was more accurate. I also, just to let you know, have this means by which I can automatically generate those links. I still am a belt and suspenders guy. I want to do it myself. I want to make sure that this is where I want these things to go. And then finally down here, this alignment thing tells me that if I have any vertices within this buffer, in this case this is set to 1, to go and snap them together. So this is the line point functionality inside of the ArcGIS Parcel fabric, is by doing these alignments here. So the join, I tell it what gets adjusted, whether it's this parcel or the surrounding parcels that get adjusted to this point. I tell it what to hold and what to adjust on here. The links that I draw are not directional. It just says, okay, take this and move this to here. All right, so it just signifies that those are endpoints, but it shows me, in fact, what and how far it's going to move. If I go over to the links, it shows me there's actually a couple different types of links. There's the ones that I digitize. Those are the ones that have the green in them. There are the ones that are generated. Those are the ones that get created when I do this. And then there's all other values in here. And those links, and as well as the anchor points, are actually separate feature classes that are stored in your default geodatabase. Just sort of create, where's my catalogs on here? There's catalog. Inside of my default geodatabase, I have anchor points and I have link points in there. All right. Eric has a question, Christopher. I just noticed. I actually have it pointed up. It's in my. What if you want the link to be directional, such as moving a parcel line to a section line? In fact, with this, just as with ArcMap, the individual links are not directional. Instead, if you tell it that you want this to go to that section line, you select the parcel that's going to be adjusted, and then you adjust it accordingly. There are other methods that you can go and make these adjustments inside of ArcGIS, but right now, the links are not directional. So you create a link and you tell it where you want those points to be moved. And then whether or not, and I shouldn't say points to be moved. In the initial one, if you have your record features selected, it will move the points. But if I go the other way, for example, if I toggle this to the surrounding, all right, let me unshow this. Now it's going to move the surrounding things to that one, or it's going to move it to the active record. So whatever is selected, that's what gets moved. All right. And this isn't as it used to be in ArcMap, where basically you did that once and then that's it. It might be that you have to go and do a couple different adjustments if you want directional. If you want certain things to go some way and other things to go the other way, you can iteratively go through this and do that. So I'm just going to go in and now click align, and it will go and make that alignment for me. And it will adjust everything to where I had told it to go. All right. Are we good with this? There should be a bunch of questions here, by the way. Yeah.
None other than Eric's.
None. Okay. So again, in looking through the ArcMap, it was create the boundary, then go and join it in place. And that join is what we just did. We created the lines, made sure they were closed to create the seed. Then we created the parcel. The lines were already there. And then we aligned it. In essence, we put it in place where it's supposed to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clip it. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and tell it to only have my tax parcels on when I go to clip this. And the reason why I did that is that it is in fact snapping. Is what it's doing. It's telling it to take and move these things and adjust them. But interestingly, and I will show you with an example here in a minute, it's a little bit more than snapping because it tries to maintain the integrity of that shape as it's moving it around. So in this clipping now, I actually have on my parcel remainder over an ArcMap, it went according to what I had shown as being turned on and selectable. And I could have gone and said, well, I don't want these to be clipped. So you have the option to tell it what you want to clip. Inside of ArcGIS, you're going to have that same option. With, on the very bottom of the pane, of the clip pane, there is an option that says clip all editable features. And since I turned off my simultaneous conveyances, I turned off all my other layers, including all my PLSS and such. I don't want it to clip those. I only want them to clip the tax parcels right now. So I basically turn them all off except for the tax parcels. So I can use this. If I didn't use this, I could turn that off and say, okay, here's the parcel that's my input, and then I can actually say, okay, now go ahead and figure out everything you're going to clip on here, and it will go in and list everything that it is going to clip. Now these other parcels, by the way, are because it's right on the boundary. It actually goes and searches, uses a little tolerance to go and search and finds everything that's on that boundary in case it does have to clip it or not. Again, I'm not going to go use that. I'm going to use the easy way of doing this. But if you want to really control it, you can uncheck that and say, clip this, don't clip this. Clip this, don't clip this. I'd rather make the software intelligent. All right. So there it is. I can say clip this, go ahead and clip it out. All right. So when we're done now, let's see. I can clip on this. Let's turn on the historic parcels and see. Here's my new parcel. Here's my old parcel. Now notice one of the things that it hasn't done yet, it doesn't do yet, is it doesn't keep the attribution and recalculate all the other stuff on there. What we recommend is that we just go and say copy, paste right now to go and do that, and then make sure that we update the calculated area and stated area on there. All right, so that is a meets and bounds parcel. Taking it and inputting the traverse, putting it in place by using that align, then going and clipping it against your existing layer and making sure that it's valid. Not a huge bunch of differences. However, the difference is you're using different tools. For example, you are inputting a lines and then checking to see if the lines are closed, and then going and building it. Whereas with ArcMap, you never really input lines until you said build that parcel, right? So as just sort of as a little diversion now, what I want to do is I want to go and explore a little bit more of that alignment on here, just sort of to show you what really is happening here. So if I go in here and say, let's go and create a tax parcel here, I'm actually creating a polygon now. All right, I'm not doing lines. I'm doing a polygon. And there is my polygon. If you recall when we started talking about this, I said that inside of the ArcGIS parcel fabric, it doesn't require you to go and build the lines and the points for it. Rather, the fabric itself checks to see if they exist. If they don't exist, it creates them. So in this case, I've created a polygon, and just to say it is one polygon. It is no lines or anything associated with it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my parcel fabric tools and say, build whatever is missing here. So I can say build this, and when I build it, if you actually looked, if you watched here, let's go and unbuild it. And if you watch, it actually will put, in fact, the lines, and it will put the points at the ends of those lines. So it actually goes and checked on the record, said, okay, here's the record. You're supposed to have two things. Let's check on those two things and make sure they have the required polygons, lines, and points, and build them. All right. So the fabric, again, has a little bit different function inside of ArcGIS than it does inside of ArcMap, but it's still meant to go and help you to build complete parcels, complete polygons, which have everything they need on them. All right, so now let's go in here and do this aligned again. In this case, I built it quite a bit off, and I really don't care about showing that because I'm going to go in and do some other things. First thing, let's go and move this. All right, let's go and move what I have here, and I'm going to go and take and move this to here. All right, I'm also going to make sure that I move the points with it. All right, so back to move again. I'm going to move my anchor to here, and I'm now going to go and move it so it snaps there. I click on the plus sign to go ahead and finish that. So I've now moved it to where that should be. I'm then going to click Align Points, put an anchor here. All right, just to verify there is an anchor here. Then I'm going to add my links, and I can control where that link is supposed to go. I can actually say go ahead and generate and see if it created one. It did not create one here. Let's go and put one there. And tell it to go ahead and align this. Now it's gone and aligned this in here. I didn't make that huge, but it actually will go and move this corner here relative to the way everything else moved on there. So it's not just moving those lines, but looking and attempting to go and create and maintain that same geometry as it goes around. So again, it's not just moving lines, but it's actually attempting to keep that geometry on there as much as possible for that. All right. No questions on there.
Nope.
Good. Okay. Let me go in here and go to there. So I'll undo all of that. There we go. All right. Simple workflow. If I'm going to do a new parcel, I create a record. I either create the lines and then create the seed to make sure it is a closed set of lines, and then build the parcel. Or I use the polygon and I build a polygon and then build it to make sure that it creates the lines and the corners for me. Move it into place, tell it and line it up so that make sure everything is coincident between there, and then I can do a clip. If there are no questions, let's move on to the next thing, which is, oh, actually, I guess I didn't have one here. I think what I'm going to do, I had a bookmark here for Aliquot. All right, I'm going to use this parcel here. All right, I'm going to use this parcel here and build something Aliquot off of that. So inside of here, normally what I would do is I would do a right click and I would do a construct from parent. All right. And with that construct from parent, it basically goes and takes my existing parcel, that one that I had selected, marks that historic because I'm making the same thing as what it was, and then goes and allows me to build these new things from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and on here, I'm going to go parallel. I'm going to create a parallel offset to this line. Starts here, goes to here, and I want to be, let's say 500 feet on the right side of that. And it will go and take 500 feet. It will build that line across. Took these two lines, took this line and marked it so that it wasn't going to use that line anymore, and created a new line from 3 to 6, from 3 to 6, and then a new line from 6 to 4 on this side. On the west side, it took my existing line and said, don't use that line anymore. Instead, use the line from 2 to 5 and build that, and then the line from 5 to 1 and use that for my new construction. So it goes and takes those lines, marks the old ones as old, not going to use them anymore, and then creates the new ones to replace them and goes and builds them out. I then say, go ahead and build it. Builds those two new parcels for me. Marks the old ones historic. All right. I forgot to create a plan. I should have done that. Sorry. I should have created a plan first, but I didn't. I get too wrapped up in it. So let's go in here and let's first show something that we haven't shown yet. And so inside of here, I went and copied the parcel ID of that other parcel. That's how quickly it goes and locates things inside of ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. Using this locate is now a replacement for the find command. All right. So what do I need to do? In this case, I'm going to go and create a record, and I'll call this Aliquot. Attribute it as I need to. By doing that, creating a new record, it automatically closes the other records out for me. All right, it's not going to do any more work on that. So now I have a choice. What am I going to do with this? I have two different workflows that I can use to go and build this. The first thing I can do is I can say, okay, well, let's copy these lines. Take this and copy these lines. I'm going to create a tax flow. I'm only going to show the lines that I copy, and I'm going to create a seed that contains the attributes of my existing. So inside of ArcGIS, you can consider this the construct from parent. I can go and take this if I really want to. I can take this and I can go and say, let's move that down to here. There it is there. I'm good. All right. Now my question is, how am I going to build this? I need to be 500 feet south of that parcel, or south of the north line. So I can take that north line and say parallel. Copy parallel. All right, and it will show me what direction it is in, and I want to go and build a new tax line. I don't care about keeping those original ones on here, and I can tell it I want to go 500 feet, but I don't want to go both directions. I only want to go on the left-hand side. So it allows me to go and copy that parallel. And when I do that, you'll note that it literally copied that whole line there. It didn't do any extending or trimming or anything else on there. It just copied that line. I then can go and say, well, extend and trim this, and say, clip this out, and then take and extend that line till it intersects with that. So I can do extend and trim, and you'll note with ArcGIS, you have this ability to go and extend and trim without having to select the line that you're going to actually be extending or trimming. It just looks at what you have in there using map geometry to go and do that. So I now have my lines drawn. Now, one of the biggest differences is that this did not split those lines on here and here. It did not split them at all. So the question is, well, do I want to split them or not split them? I'm using those. The legal description says the north 500 feet of this parcel. It doesn't say come down along the east line 500 feet. Doesn't say come along the west line 500 feet. So the question becomes internally, do you wish to record that as being 500 feet, or what do you want to do with it? If you wish to split these, again, you can go in here and then say split this here and split that there. All right. And you can split it, but you don't have to split it with the ArcGIS parcel fabric. You don't have to split that. As long as those lines are closed, it'll still, as long as they come and meet up with existing lines within this record, it will form a polygon and allow you to go and build it from there. So now I can say create the seeds just to check and make sure this is closed. Here's my other seed. Here's the first seed with the parent information on here. I can say build. Once I say build, it will build these two parcels and then turn on the other layers for me, or turn on the other components in here for me, so that these are now reflective of what? And it will mark that existing parcel, that original parcel, it will mark that historic for me. All right. That's one way of doing it. In this case, it's fairly easy to do. But what if I had south 500 feet, the east 200 feet of this? Well, I could have selected these two lines and said copy parallels, and it would have gone 500 feet this way, 200 feet this way, and done the same thing. So I could have created those lines in here. I'm going to actually go back to here. All right. Go back to here. And then on this record, I'm going to select just the polygon to show you I only have the polygon selected on here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the polygon and divide it. And the divide tool actually has some very interesting functions. Depending upon whether I divide a line or divide a polygon. If I divide a line, it tells me, okay, I can divide it into a set proportion. I can divide it into proportional areas. I can do a set number of distances. I can do varying distances. But when I have a polygon, it says I could do proportional area, or equal width. And I can say I want to do equal width, and then I want to go 500 feet on here. And then I want to tell it, I want to use that line as my dividing line. And say, go ahead and divide this polygon for me, if you will. Just to go and build, just to make sure that I've got everything in there. I actually have now gone and split an aliquot north 500 feet of that polygon for me. This works well if I only have one line that I'm doing. It works well if that line is not a curve and if it's a straight line. But in many instances, that's all we're doing for aliquot mapping is going and taking something and taking a line and moving it and splitting it that way. So there's a second workflow that you have for splitting portions of, splitting aliquot elements in here. The first one, draw a set of lines. Copy those lines into the new construction. Break the lines up, draw the lines for you. Build the polygons, and then create the parcels. That's one workflow. The second workflow is instead of doing it with lines, take the polygon and split the polygon up, and then tell it to automatically create the lines for you on it. Two different workflows. Sometimes one workflow might work better than the other workflow, but it's two different options that you have to be able to go and build this. Questions? Any questions? This is a very quiet group. Very quiet group. Definitely. All right. So the next thing we have to do is we have a plat of a survey that we're going to build, and then we have a CSM that we're going to build. Both of them take some time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go and take a break now, give everybody a chance to go and sort of step away from the screen. We've been almost an hour and a half now. Let's go ahead and step away from the screen. And when we come back, we'll go and we'll start two new things. One is doing a plat of survey, and then the other is going and doing a CSM. While you step away, I would like for you to think of questions, because I know this isn't obvious everything. There's got to be some questions on this. So please take your questions, and we'll start out with questions. All right? And so let's take a break now. Let you know, I'm going to stop the recording. We don't need to record 15 minutes of empty air. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm also going to turn off the webcam and my mic. And when I come back, you'll see my webcam come back on, and you'll see my mic become current again. So we'll just keep it running, and we'll go from there. All right? Let's take a 15-minute break. So let's get back here at, it would be 10:40. Does that sound good? All right.
Perfect.
Stop the recording. All right, so I have started the recording again. So Jeremy, you just asked a question about, what you're thinking about moving into the fabric, but you're not sure whether it's ArcMap Parcel Fabric, whether it's ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, what you want to do. Again, there are considerations because it's not just a black and white decision. It's not just clear cut. There are several things you need to think about. For example, with the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, because it is a constrained structure, it expects your data to be in pretty good shape before you migrate it in. All right. So the question is, how good is your data? Hopefully it's pretty good. Do you have densified curves? If you have densified curves, and by the way, you probably don't know if you have densified curves, but if you've been doing parcel mapping for a long time, the odds are you have densified curves in there. ArcGIS actually goes and hides, ArcMap hides those vertices unless you specifically try to see them. So the odds are if you came from coverages, or if your data was ever in a shapefile, or if you use some earlier versions of ArcMap, you probably have densified curves in there. And what happens is that when you bring those densified curves into the ArcMap parcel fabric, you wind up with each of those little small curve approximations that are stored that look like a curve. They actually become little straight lines, each of them having their own line, each of them having their own corner at the end of it. And because of the way ArcMap works with these relationships between lines and points and polygons, those relationships, because you have doubled and tripled and even exponentially increased the size of those relationships that have to be maintained, it winds up bogging the system down. So that with ArcMap, it's always a good idea to go and clean up your data before you put it in place. The second thing you want to think about is whether or not it's only one editor or whether it's multiple editors. With one editor, you can do it in a file geodatabase and it works fine. With multiple editors, with ArcMap Parcel Fabric, you implement that through client server, through SDE, right? And then you provide those individual editors access to those feature classes inside of SDE. So that's usually fairly easy for an organization to do because the odds are they have server running, they have SQL, they have a SQL server or some sort of relational database management system running. And it's all internal. The challenging part of that is that making sure that those indexes are well maintained, both the attribute indexes and the spatial indexes. So it requires a little bit more back end. The database administrator requires a little bit more work on their part to keep it all working well. The way the client server implementation, the way SDE goes and manages versions, these editing versions, it's a little bit trickier. So should you move into ArcMap? Those are two very primary considerations. The third consideration on that is, in my opinion, ArcMap is on its last legs, all right? As you guys already told us that, in fact, they will only support a software for 6 years after the last release is out there. And if you've been following the newer releases of ArcMap, you'll see that there aren't a whole lot of functions that are being put out there, only that there are, in fact, software bugs being fixed. They're more and more, they're moving towards using Portal and web services for that, and ArcMap isn't built for that. So at most, you can consider that you're going to be using that ArcMap parcel fabric for maybe another 6 years. That's about it. That's about it. ArcGIS parcel fabric. It does not have the constraint of those densified curves giving you a performance hit. They're still in there. They're still ugly, really ugly, and you should fix them. Hopefully at the end of this session, I'll have a little bit of time to show you sort of how to fix things inside of ArcGIS to make it's actually a little bit easier. It's not trivial, but it can get done on there. Matter of fact, I'm going to go and Chris, you're not in Jefferson right now, are you?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to go and open up a project for a client that we're right now doing some work on to clean that up, just to show you sort of the tools that you would use to do that. So this is in fact Jefferson County. Let me see if I can find some areas here. So inside of ArcGIS, I am now going and symbolizing it because ArcGIS has that capability to show me all the vertices. And you can see if they didn't know they had all these densified curves. So you have to go and fix all these densified curves. So there's a function inside of here called align features. And align features will allow you to go in here and take these densified curves and draw a new path and say, take every vertex that's within my buffer, my tolerance of 5 feet, and move it and replace those lines and replace those polygons with this new path that I'm drawing. So it will go in here and say, and replace them and say, okay, take all those densified curves and replace them with a single curve, a true geometric curve. So that's exactly what this is here. All right. And again, I do this a lot. So this is somewhat, it looks simple. It's not as simple because there's all sorts of little gotchas in here. Chris especially is doing this on a lot of our clients' work. It allows you to have the capability of going and not just cleaning up a single layer, but actually looking and comparing at layers that are stacked on one another. So if you have a misalignment or what we call vertical alignment issues, it allows you to fix those at the same time, together with fixing all those curves. So if you have tax parcels and you have lots and you have subdivisions and you have zoning, and they all have densified curves on them, this will allow you to go and take one curve and fix it on all of those layers at the same time. So there are tools inside of ArcGIS to allow you to clean that up. That is horrendous inside of ArcMap to try to do that. So that was the first point about densified curves and whether or not you have quality data in there. It's not as horrible inside of ArcGIS as it is in ArcMap. And with the fabric, you don't suffer a penalty because of that. It's still there. You still have to do it. Matter of fact, if you bring it into the fabric, it will automatically create lines and points for you. You have to clean them all out before you go and fix those curves and then rebuild them. But it's easier than if it's in ArcMap. That's the second point. The other point is if you have multiple editors, all right, within ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, the multiple editors doesn't use SDE versioning. Instead, it uses branch versioning off of web services. So that if you have multiple editors in there, you want to make sure that you have to have ArcGIS Server, Enterprise, and serving out the feature classes that are part of the Parcel Fabric as web services. So it's a different environment for setting up the multi-editor. Doesn't mean it's bad. I've done it up with several of them. And it's just another hurdle. It's another barrier to getting in there. And it is new technology. You want to make sure that you have a good server in place and that you have portals set up and that you've got you've got minimal latency issues with your connections over to that. It works. It works well. From a database administrator standpoint, there's actually some advantages to branch versioning versus SDE versioning. SDE versioning stores things in multiple tables, and you have to go and maintain that a lot. Branch versioning, that's minimized. There's no compression of your version tables because it basically is one table. Everything just gets timestamped with branch versioning. So I know I didn't give you an answer, but there's a lot of things to think about to go and do that. So by all means, if you're thinking about it, you want to sort of figure it out, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you, talk you through those conversations that you have to have. But it depends on each individual organization as far as whether or not they're in a position to do that. I can tell you the ones that are easy are those organizations that only have one person editing it. They're easy. Yeah, by all means, if you have small organization with only one person editing it, you should be in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric right now. It's so much easier to edit than what you used to be doing, almost 100% guaranteed. It's easier to do it here.
Frank, before you move on, we have a few questions.
Okay.
First, in regards to what you were just talking about, the align feature tool, what about a line that is not a densified curve, such as a shoreline? Can you remove the extra index points with this tool as well?
Yeah, the extra lines that are in there, the extra vertices, to show you my age now, there used to be an ArcInfo command called remove pseudonodes or unsplit all, I think they used to call it. Basically what it would do is it would take those individual lines and merge them together. Well, that merge together is the same thing that happens now inside of ArcGIS. So if I go in here and just sort of simplify, show you, these are 2-point lines that I'm going to be creating here. All right. Let me make sure that I get off of this. It's a bunch of 2-point lines is what they are here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all those. I'm going to unselect my polygon, and I'm going to merge those 2-point lines into one line. All right. And that's basically the same thing that what happens. It's a merge. It's not necessarily a realignment. If you're talking about, well, how do I correct gaps or overlaps between them? Yes, the realignment tools inside of ArcGIS are amazing. There are things such as the align features, which is what I just showed you, where it says basically take all of these and give them this new shape. There's also things like align edge, where you goes and says fill in the gaps. Make sure there's no overlaps, make sure there's no gaps in there. And that's an interactive tool in here. There's a lot of tools to go and clean up the data inside of ArcGIS. So you, by all means, you should be using them. You should be over there. Matter of fact, I'll give you just a little bit hint. I know tomorrow, in fact, there's still a whole lot of sessions going on. We are actually having a workshop tomorrow on ArcGIS Pro and some of the alignment tools. So if you get a chance, please think about maybe joining ours. And unfortunately, it's not affiliated with the WLIA, but sorry about that. But we have weekly workshops, and ArcGIS Pro and how to use those tools are one of them. So go ahead, Joe or Chris, some more.
Mark has a couple questions here. First, is there a cheat sheet out there for how to do splits, merges, rejoins in Arc Pro, the stuff that we covered before the break?
No, there's not a cheat sheet. It's one of those things where as I'm going through and teaching people about this, for the most part, and I understand it's a new way of looking at these things. There isn't a specific cheat sheet. I know that Esri has come up with some new training courses for this, but when I'm looking at the syllabus on them, it doesn't really go over these. These are just simple editing things. I've actually thought about, well, maybe one of the things that we need to do is come with a workflow, because these are decisions, but each of the situations call for different decisions. As I showed you with that aliquot, if it's a straight line one way, maybe you can use the polygon. But if it's multiple ways, maybe you use the lines. So it's like you've got a decision tree you're going through, but there isn't specific cheat sheets out there yet. And by the way, that's one of the problems with one of the suggestions that Esri's had is that maybe we need to develop a whole series of tasks. The problem is you have all these different types of tools that you use to go and edit this stuff. So literally you would have a different task for every single one of those different workflows or different approaches. So sorry, there aren't, Mark.
And then we have two more questions. One from Mark. He says, for a single editor, would you recommend 1, a local file geodatabase, 2,
Yes.
a network file geodatabase, or 3, would it still be advantageous to use web services? Anyways.
Okay. Personal opinion. It depends upon the organization. All right. So by all means, if you want the fastest access, it would be a file geodatabase stored on a local drive. If, however, you're in an organization that doesn't want you storing data locally, wants them stored on a server, then yes, if you've got a good, file geodata or file server out there that has good access, you can store it on a file server. We do that all the time here, and that sometimes will work off of our server and off of our cloud storage. Sometimes we'll work locally. Depends on what you're doing on there, how big your data is. But by all means, the fastest is going to be the local file geodatabase. That doesn't mean it's the most secure, though. You better make sure you have backups of that. We do that internally. We have like 3 backups for every file, and it gets backed up constantly. So file geodatabase, network geodatabase second, and then web services. I'm a surveyor, so I try to keep it simple. I want to make sure that there's the minimum number of complexities introduced into whatever I'm doing. Because as you introduce complexities in there, you introduce edge cases that are causing you problems. So would I recommend that somebody go with only one editor, go and put in place Enterprise, serve their parcel fabric over Enterprise, and edit it using web services? Probably not, unless I knew they were really good in web services. They had a really fast, server. Maybe if you're using Amazon Web Services, that might be a good suggestion on here. I mean, it is, no doubt about it, web services are the future, but there's a lot of complexity built into that solution at the moment, and you want to make sure you know what you're doing on that. But it works. You just want to make sure that you know what you're doing there. So, okay. Any more?
Okay, one final question. Anne wants to know if you can explain the seed and its function again. And she wants to know, is it a feature class on its own?
In fact, a seed is not a feature class on its own. A seed, and I'll share with you a story. During holistic testing on this about a year and a half ago, we spent a week out in Redlands with Esri, and they introduced this concept to us. And there was a lot of pushback on it, that why would you do that? And from their standpoint, a seed can be thought of as a validation that in fact your lines form a complete area, they're closed. But more importantly, it's the beginning point of your parcels. You can actually take a seed and go and attribute it and everything else. It just isn't fully expanded to the boundary that you've drawn. So you can think of it as that thing, that seed. You put that seed there, and then you let it grow out until the boundaries. We also had a whole lot of discussion about that name, that term. So it is actually stored. If I look here on here, this is my tax parcel polygon layer. All right. I actually have polygons stored here. And I have polygons where there's an attribute field on here called, let's look at here this way. The attribute is called isSeed, meaning is this polygon that's being created, is it fully grown or is it just the beginning of it? So the software will go and calculate whether or not the lines that are part of your record are closed and put a polygon in there. Now that polygon is just a polygon. It doesn't have any boundaries on it. It's just something to say, yes, you're going to go and put a full parcel here. All right, but it doesn't really have a full shape on it. It is a polygon, just a weird shape on it. And what the software does is when you hit build, it goes and looks for any polygons that are seeds. Say, oh, there's a seed. I have to go and grow that thing. I have to go and build it until it reaches the overall boundary lines that I've drawn. So it sort of expands it as you go. To answer your question, it is not a separate feature class. It's included on the polygon feature class for each of the layers that are inside of your parcel fabric. All right. So you will have seeds for both tax parcels. You'll have seeds for conveyance divisions, for simultaneous conveyances, for encumbrances. They'll all have seeds on them. But those seeds are just part of the original building. An interesting element is if I go in here and go to here, I can actually go and create a seed. And notice the seed is nothing more than a little dot on here. But I could create a seed polygon on each of those layers. I don't want to do that for the most part, but I could create that if I wanted to. So it's a type of polygon that's on that layer, and it's just marked for the parcel fabric. Then when the parcel fabric is going through and verifying and building it, it says, if I have any seeds, expand them until they meet those lines that are out there. That's really what a seed is. Does that help? Okay. Thanks, Kim. All right. So where are we now? Let's go and look. Let me see here. If I look here at what I have next is what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and build a plat of survey. All right. And it's a plat of survey and starts up at a control point over here, goes down to a point here. Then it defines the overall boundary. There's a curve in here. So we'll deal with that. And it's adjacent to existing parcels. And it's a plat of survey that then gets broken into two different parcels, parcel A, parcel B, gets into those two different parcels, and then those two parcels become tax parcels. Those two lots become tax parcels, and those tax parcels are then split out. All right. I'm going to go and do this same process both in ArcMap, and then I'm going to do it again in ArcGIS to compare the two different workflows, the two different functions. And you'll notice the differences between the two. All right, so I unfortunately, because of the size of the screen, I'm not going to go and be able to go and keep this up on the screen the whole time. So you're going to have to sort of trust me. That's what I'm doing here. And I'm going to hand input this. I'm actually going to have a copy of it up on another screen that's not being shared right now. But I'm going to input everything that's on here by hand. I'm not going to cheat anymore. I'm not going to do any demos where it's already done. I want you to see me and watch me doing this. All right. Any questions before we start? Nope.
Doesn't look like it.
Nope. All right. So I did cheat by go and have at least a bookmark for it. Okay. So I did at least cheat that way. So I'd have to go and find it. All right. So again, it has an origin connection, starts here, comes down to here, excuse me, comes down over to here, and then it goes around here, forms the plat of survey. Then I'm going to take that. I'm going to go and do a construct from parent to split it into lots, and I'm going to take those lots and sort of duplicate them to become tax parcels. Okay. First thing I want to do is I want to go to new parcel, and I'm going to set a plan. I want to set a plan. Thank you. Doesn't want to do that. So I'm going to do it this way. Plan directory. I'll create a new plan. And this is called S-1801. All right. Here, these look fine. These look fine. Here. There it is there. That's my current plan. All right. And I'm going to create this, and I'm going to use S-1801. I'm going to change my template because this is going to be, I don't have it here inside of here. I'm going to create this as a sub, even though I know it's not a sub.
Double check the plan again. It didn't take.
Thank you. Because what happens is as I change this.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting why it's not doing this. Huh. I could see it there. It just doesn't want to go and hold that. And I go in here and I say, huh, interesting.
Can you close it out?
I can close out ArcMap completely. Let's try this one more time. You know, actually, thank you, Christopher, because I've run into this before with, and let me go and do that also with ArcGIS Pro. I'll go to meeting. If it goes in and out, it often will has problems. It's also exacerbated because these are both using the exact same data file geodatabase. So there may be linkage problems and things like that. Okay. All right, so let's start this again. Go over here, start editing. Go in here, do a new plan. That's my current plan.
There we go.
Set my template to sub. There it is. S-1801. Thanks, Chris. All right.
No problem.
Then I'll go and I'll start with the lines. And I will start and say, here And my bearing is 62.25, 40, 21. And that is southwest for 1402.45 feet. Let's make this a little bigger on my screen. 46 feet. All right, and that is not a boundary. In fact, that is an origin connection line. All right, so now I'm at the point of beginning. And by the way, that's how you change whether or not it's part of the boundary or whether it's part of your origin connection lines inside of an ArcMap. Now what I'm going to do, this is now the point of beginning of this parcel, and I'm going to start inputting it. 70.1654, and that is in a southeast direction for 154.07 feet to a curve. A curve has a chord bearing of 2 degrees, 12 minutes, 48 seconds southwest, and that is a CB, a chord bearing. And the radius is a minus 216.50. It's a radius to the left, so it's minus, and the chord distance is 65.29. All right. Now let me go and continue putting the boundary in. Um, 82.0914, and that's southwest for 197.39 feet, and then 56.4029, and that's northwest for 126.30 feet. All right, 73.5835 northwest, 92.38 feet, 48.3342 northeast, 148.24 feet, and then finally closing 70.1654, and that is in a southeast direction, 144.71 feet. And in fact, it tells me that it does close, and it's 0.97 is my area included on here. All right, now that I've got closed polygon, I've got everything set, I'm now going to go and keep this polygon and join it in place. And let's go and keep it. I'm now going to go in here and tell it to join. And in fact, I'm going to join my point of beginning here. Excuse me, my point of commencement there. And I'm going to go in here. And join this here. This here. And then this here. No place else to join it. All right, so I am comfortable with that. So I'm going to go ahead and join. There it is there. And again, I think I only have that one type in here. I don't have my plat of survey. Oh, I do. I don't have a template for it. That's it. Let me see here. Any templates here, here. I already have sub. I already have that. Finish there. So now I should be able to go and make this plat of survey. All right. All right. So I think I'm now done. There are no subs underneath here, so I have nothing to go and do parcel remainder from. I'm good with that. Everybody good with that workflow? This is normally what I would do. I would go in here, do it, create the new single plan, build everything underneath that. My next step is to go and build the individual lots out of that. So I would take my cursor, go and say construct from parent. All right. And this time I would go and say I'm constructing lots out of here. And I actually have a line that goes from here to here. I'll go and compare it. Actually, the bearing is supposed to be 42 here. And this is 6.1. I can then say go ahead and build and keep my subdivision, my plat of survey as current, and go ahead and build that out. There's my two parcels. This one here is actually parcel A, and this one is parcel B. All right. We're still good with that, right? Perfect. All right, so my next step then is to go and make these both tax parcels. So I would do a duplicate of these two onto tax parcels, and I would duplicate them as joined and build them in there. And I'm just going to mark these here. Parcel A, parcel B. All right. Then finally, all I need to do is I need to do a parcel remainder. And in this case, I don't want to go against the sub. I don't want to go against the other two joins, and I want to have it create new parcel remainders for the other. And it should. There's my new parcel here. Here's my new remainder parcel here. All right. So one of the things we will find, and one of the things we have found here, is that this seems to be fairly straightforward workflow. Once you learn the tools, it's pretty easy to do. It works you through. Once you learn the tools, once you learn how to use those tools. And this is, again, 10 years worth of production, a couple years of development before that. So this is a mature product. And the reason I'm prefacing this is that ArcGIS Parcel Fabric is new, and it isn't quite as refined as this, but you can do the same thing. So it probably will not be quite as fast. I guarantee it won't be quite as fast. A, because I'm still learning how to do this, but B, because it's still, they don't have those automated workflows because, or they don't have those automated tools because this is set up to use standard tools. So you don't have a whole bunch of learning curve. Literally, the only learning curve that you have is the tools that you would normally use with ArcGIS. You don't have a huge learning curve for everything else. So let's go and do this. All right. First thing I'm going to do is, like I created a plan, I'm going to create a record here. Again, the record will serve to go and keep track of everything that I'm doing. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do a traverse. And I'm going to create, in this case, I'm going to create not an origin connection line anymore, but I'm going to create the connection lines inside of the ArcGIS Parcel fabric. Those origin connection lines, they are not connected to the parcel. They are in fact referenced as part of a record. So 62.2521, and that's southwest. And the distance is 1402.46. All right. So an interesting part is that a difference between that ArcMap construction grid and ArcGIS Traverse tool is that the ArcMap construction grid builds nothing until the very end. The ArcGIS Traverse tool, every single time you hit enter, it puts a line in place. So this is not creating a network of vectors. This is individually lines. These lines are getting created every single time. So one of the complaints I've heard is that, well, this traverse is not as fast as the other traverse because you can go and type things in pretty quickly there. And in here, every time I hit enter, it's creating a new line for me and drawing that new line for me. All right, it's creating all of these things for me. So yes, there is a difference between these two, and you need to be aware of that. The ArcGIS Traverse function creates lines as you're going. It creates these lines. All right, let me go in here now. And now, since I have to change, I actually want to go in here and go to new. Let me go and put my simultaneous conveyances on first. And then I want to go and change so that I want to create a new type of line because previously it was building connection lines. Now what I want to do is I want to build simultaneous conveyance lines. All right. So now I want to start here and let's put in that traverse. 70.1654, and that is southeast for a distance of 154.07. All right. So Brent, did you have a question, or can I go and turn off your screen? I'm going to go in and stop your sharing. Sorry, Brent. All right. So now I've got this curve that I'm going to put in here. And in this case, I'm going to go and say, okay, it's 2.1248, and that is southwest. And it is a curve, a chord bearing. Again, you see the same sort of input between these. Chord bearing, 0 distance for my radius, negative 216.50 here. And in this case, I have the option of either putting arc length in here. I could put the chord length in, 65.29 feet. All right. Now I put 82.0914, and that's southwest, for a distance of 197.39 feet. I then have 56.4029, that's northwest, for a distance of 126.30 feet. All right. I now have, I don't know what's going on here. 73.5835 northwest for 92.38 feet. 48.3342 northeast, 148.24 feet, and then closing back 70.1654, and then southeast for 144.71 feet. And in fact, it tells me I have a misclosure of 0, and I come up with exactly the same area included inside there. So with the traverse tool, I put the lines in. I haven't done anything else. I've just put the lines in here. So now I can go in here and say, all right, well, now let's create the seed. Make sure here's the seed. And again, this is creating a seed for my simultaneous conveyances. All right, so there's my seed. I can say, go ahead and build this out. And it goes and built that on here. So now S-1801, and it is a plat of survey for it. Stated area 0.97 acres on here. All right, created it. It's done. All right, so I could use the same record just like I used the same plan in the other, and now go and create the lots. In this case, I want to turn these lots back on, and I'm going to say, instead of construct from parent, I'm going to say copy lines to, go in here and say copy it lines to the conveyance divisions. And I really don't care about preserving it, and just only show me what's in my current record. And again, that show me what's in the current record basically is just to go and make it easier for you to see what's going on here when you go and do this. So now all I have to do is I've got a line that it goes from here to here. So I go in here, conveyance division line, and say here to here. Let's go ahead and put in my direction, 20.1142. That's in a southwest direction. And my distance is 153.61 on here. All right. So one thing immediately you will see is that it actually allows me to build lines without actually having bearings and distances on them. I could just draw lines without having any COGO values on them, and it would store that. In this case, because this is part of a plat of a survey, I want to record that's what this was shown on here. And if I wanted to, I could actually compare that to the actual length that's in here, 152.61 on here. I also have in here whether or not this is from measurements, whether this information is from measurements, whether it was inversed, whatever. So I have the ability to go and tell it what type of COGO values are stored. Is it from the deed? Is it from measurements, or is it inversed, or is it calculations here from the geometry, or is it something that was calculated when I did a clip? So I have those capabilities in here. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to select everything as part of that record right now and just sort of go through here. I've got simultaneous. I don't really want those in here. Here's my conveyance division lines in here. Here's my simultaneous conveyance point. Here's my connection lines. I really don't care about that. All right, so here is my lines for my lots. Here's my conveyance division seed at the moment. I'm going to tell it to create another seed for this one here. Again, if I wanted to, I can go in here and say this seed right here, just to let you know, that's actually parcel B, and that is a lot. All right. And then I'm going to go back here and say, okay, now let's create the other seed. Let's select that other seed. That's parcel A, and that is also a lot. And say build this. When I build it, it's going to go and build it and then go and turn on my display again, so it shows not just my current active, or not just my active, but everything else on here. By the way, the one thing I forgot to do, I forgot to go and quote join this to check and see how close it actually matched against this. Let's go in here and look. Ah, there is a little bit of difference. So let's go and do.
Frank, Mark also has a question.
Yes, sir, Mark.
When he digitized the conveyance line, he noticed that unlike ArcMap, ArcGIS Pro did not populate the bearing and distance from the digitized line. Is this an option?
No, no. When you digitize a line, it basically records that that's a digitized line. If I actually go into Traverse, and I'll do this when I'm done. When I go into the Traverse and digitize a line, it will record that bearing and distance that I digitized in brackets. And what that actually tells it is that this is not a real value. This is just sort of what you calculated this. All right, and it doesn't store digitized values. It only shows them to you, so you can do a comparison to see, well, what's going on here and that sort of thing. But in fact, that's another big difference, is that it does not automatically calculate the bearing and distance for every line that you draw. It leaves you that option for that, so that if you want to calculate it, you could select that and say update the COGO on it, and it will go and calculate what those values are. Or you could key them in if it's coming from a subdivision plat or a survey, but it does not automatically do that for you. Okay, good question, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay. So now we've realized that this actually doesn't match up exactly to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and do the align. Now realize I didn't do the line the first time I created that plat of survey. But it's going to go and align everything that's associated with my current record, my active record, 1801. It's now going to go and align that. So again, I don't have to do that right away. I can go and check, go through this and do everything I need to do, and then tell it, take everything that's in my current record and align it according to these new elements in here. So let me go in here and just see if any of these match. Nope. Nope, I can tell already. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do some links here. I'm going to say this actually goes over here. And it'll show me it's 100th off. Now, most of us as parcel mappers would say 100 really doesn't matter. But when you're doing validation using topology rules, it does. Those of us that have had to clean up hundreds, it actually does matter. All right, so there's the 3. I want to go and take my existing record and align all of them so they are coincident with those points. I want to move them. And one of the interesting things is that you're going to find is that it's actually going to move this point here, but it may not move my connection line. Let's go in and just check and see. It may not move the end of my connection line. One of the little idiosyncrasies of the way it's put in place right now. All right.
Frank, Mark wants to know, how do we know parcels are not joined correctly unless we significantly zoom into the points or run topology rules?
Those are 2 ways. Right now, there is no way to go and tell it. For example, just like right now in ArcMap, there's no way to tell whether you joined it correctly until you actually go in and look at that. The difference is that you can run a topology rule, and if you have a topology rule that says you can't have gaps or overlaps, it will check that as an error. But be careful, and we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but by default, these layers do not have that topology rule that says you can't have gaps or overlaps. Because, for example, you might have stacked parcels and other things in here. So the topology rules, let's go down that rabbit hole. All right. Let's go in here and let's look at the topology rules for here. So the topology rules basically say, and they're the same for every layer you have, that the endpoint must be covered by a point, so that the end of a line has to have a point on it. That, in fact, you must not have dangles. You must not have overlaps. You must not self-intersect. And the lines must be covered by the boundary of a point. All right, and that the polygons must be covered by a line. But it doesn't have topology rules that say you can't have gaps between parcels and you can't have overlaps between parcels. That's not part of the standard rules. If you want to, you can put them in here. You can add them for whatever layer you want, but by default, that's not the topology that this is checking. It's not your grandfather's topology. This is the topology that says we're just going to verify that these parcels consist correctly in and of themselves. Okay. So on that join, since I didn't have an anchor point, it didn't do anything, I bet. Yeah. All right, let me go and go back here. Let's go to move. Let's go to move. So one of the things I'm discovering here as we're moving this and doing this more and more is that, this anchor point's here. Let's go put an anchor point there now. And one of the things I am discovering is that if you don't have an anchor point, the align doesn't work quite as much quite as well as you think it would. And interestingly, when I do that, it says, okay, that actually is where it's supposed to be. Sorry, hopefully this doesn't make any of you sick zooming in and out like this. When it was lined up like that, it actually was exactly where it should have been. So I don't need to do that line. Once I moved it correctly to where it was. All right. I've gone in, I've created the plat of survey, I've created the lots out of it. What's left for me to do now? To go and actually take this and copy it up to tax parcels. All right, so let me go and take lot B, lot A. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and let me go and make this a little bit bigger so we can see these. I'm going to duplicate this. So just as we went and did a duplicate on the lots in ArcMap, now we're going to go and do a duplicate over to the tax parcels and let it go and copy these two over into the tax parcels, right? Make sure we built them. And now we should have parcel A, parcel B, as we had before. All right, so now let's turn these off. Let's turn our anchor points off too. All right, I now have select here, and let's do a clip and clip against the others. We don't care about this. And go ahead and there's our parcels that we want to clip and clip against these other two. There's that remainder, there's the other remainder. They are not attributed. That's the only thing that we found that is problematic about this. So we did the same workflows. Again, it's within ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. You do the same function. It may not be quite as refined because you still have a couple little bit more steps, but it's exactly the same thing. All right, it's exactly the same thing as what we did in ArcMap Parcel Fabric. So what other questions do we have on this? Anything? Does it look as easy? Does it look as a little bit more complicated? What do we have here? Any questions on this? Nope. All right.
It does look like Tony wants to know. He says, this may not be part of the discussions, but why is he only moving the 3 southern points on the new survey to the 3 northern points on the existing CSM? Shouldn't the new data be translated and rotated as a whole or to match? Or if the new data is on the better reference, north bearing line, shouldn't the older CSM be adjusted? But then he says, but that may be a different topic.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad topic though, because when I did that align, when I did that move, let's start with the move. When I did the move, what I did is I took the structure, everything that I had created as part of my active record. I took my plat of survey lines, the points that were built on that. I took my conveyance divisions, the lots that I created, took those polygons, and I took those lines. I took all of those and selected them and moved them all at one time. So I didn't necessarily make any real adjustments or changes in the geometry of those things. And they had on them the record information about what was the bearings and the distances for those. The same way with this parcel down here on the south, that plat of survey and those lots all had their record bearings and distances on them. Now, the question was, which of these was right? I'm a surveyor. You get into real problems when you start asking me what's right and what's not right. in this case, because of this, I moved them and they look like the same, angles were the same, and that the distances were the same. So I didn't attempt to do any corrections to make sure which was right or which was wrong, or any adjustments. I said, let's put those two together. They may say that they're different bearings, but I'm going to leave it at that because I just want to store a record of what those original plats of survey showed. I didn't want to go in and try to adjust any of them. All right. So again, I wasn't here attempting to go and make any adjustments on the actual information that was shown on those original records, those original plats of survey, but I just wanted to use those and keep those and just keep the mapping so that it was in place. That's an interesting point, though, is that the difference between ArcMap and ArcGIS, especially in the parcel fabric, is that within ArcMap, you pay more attention to things such as misclosures and rotations and the actual information that's stored on those lines when you're building that geometry and then putting it in place. And it's stored with that. But inside of ArcGIS, it's not as an intensive an analysis of those vectors that make up that overall boundary. Instead, it is more of a cartographic type of mapping. While it does have information about whether I rotated and scaled this on here, it only stores that if I have a meets and bounds description that is created from. It doesn't store it if it's created from an aliquot description or if I just digitize it. So it's a little bit more selective of, or instead of saying selective, let's say flexible in what it actually stores and what actually is maintained in here. It provides you with a little bit easier mapping experience than the ArcMap parcel fabric. The ArcMap parcel fabric, many of our clients have found it's just overwhelming. It's just way too much. As a surveyor, that to me is intuitive. But for most parcel mappers, it's an awful lot to go and pick up and figure out what to do, that sort of thing. Did that solve it, or did that answer your question, Tony? Yeah.
Hopefully it did.
Hopefully.
Kim has a question.
Yes.
She's asking, is the relationship between the PLSS monumentation as control points different in the ArcGIS fabric than the old ArcMap fabric?
That's a great question. It is different. It is very different. It is radically different. So inside of the ArcMap parcel fabric, all right, you have a separate feature class here called control points. All right, and these control points here are basically standalone points that never, in the normal sequence of operation, are moved. They are never touched, never removed, never adjusted. All right, which is both good from a control point standpoint, but also problematic because there's some funky little idiosyncrasies. For example, within the control points, it has a active here. They've got aliases on in here, so I'm not quite sure exactly which thing I'm doing. Let's go in here. Let's do an identify on this control point. All right, so on here, what I have is the point ID. That point ID actually is an identification of the fabric point that's associated with it. All right, says that the control point's located here, but there's a point that's within a certain tolerance that is associated with this point. All right, and that's this point ID, and also has to do with whether or not it's active, whether it has a point associated with it or not. So if your control point has a point associated with it, it's marked as being active, and that point is then identified as it should be on top of that control point. But there's, in a weird sequence, you can do things such as maybe you have an update to your control point values by going and importing things, and your control point moves as a result of getting new survey information for the coordinate values for that control point. What will happen is that that control point will move and it'll be reflective, but the fabric point still says that, oh, it's associated with this fabric point. So you try doing things like joining things and they'll join to the wrong place. Or when you go and attempt to go and build something, it'll build to the wrong place because you've got different values stored inside of those control points that say this is the real location of this fabric point, not how it's shown. So there's a very strange relationship there that is complex, and it often will cause problems within the ArcMap parcel fabric. ArcGIS parcel fabric, all right? One of the things you'll note is that there is only one point feature class in here. There's only one pointer feature class in here, and that point feature class has an attribute that says, is this point a fixed point or is it not a fixed point? So within there, a fixed point is a control point. A non-fixed point is a normal point that you can move around. So rather than having two different sets of these things, the ArcGIS parcel fabric has them stored as a single layer, and you can use a control point as the corner of your parcel. All right. And if you update that control point, it automatically moves and your parcel will automatically be adjusted. Matter of fact, in the next release of software, I'm already doing some beta testing on it now. It's gone into beta. There is a function which allows you to go and apply an adjustment to your control points or update the values of your control points, and your points automatically move and your parcels automatically move to correspond with that, because it is utilizing that relationship that's built in because of topology instead of because of having these individual links back and forth that often will get confused. All right. So, good question on here. I just looked at the clock and I realized it's almost
10 minutes.
It's only 10 minutes left to our workshop. As I thought, I ran out of time. So let me go and do one more thing here, and let me go and show you, and I showed you some of this already in here. But one of the advantages is that inside of, I guess this is not what I was looking at here. Oh, I guess I should turn them all on. All right, what I have here is I have the normal black and all the normal parcel information on here, and the red lines are denoting the PLSS breakdown, so that just as an example, I'm not saying we should do this automatically, but just as an example, if I need to adjust this because I have come up with a new solution for where these lines should be, the alignment tools inside of ArcGIS allow us to make these adjustments much faster, much better. So I'm going to go in and make this adjustment and move these parcels down to the new line 4 here. And again, you're going to see me using that same function in here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close out, and I'm not going to make this part of a record. This is just going to be normal cleanup on here. And then I can use this tool here, and which is the Align Features tool, and say, let's see what this difference is. And let's draw, let's get in here. Let's go to here. Let's go to here. And let's go to here. Let's make this a little bit bigger here to show that it's actually inside that buffer. Keep that rounded so it gets that one. And show you some of these alignment functions in here. So if I have to go and fix this, again, I demonstrated at the end of the break, fixing the curves on here. Well, this is fixing the alignment in here, and it's the same sort of thing. And let's go and fix that so that these parcels now are coincident with that sectional breakdown that I have better confidence in. It's better information for what we had. All right. So there are good alignment tools inside of ArcGIS Pro. Doing that in ArcMap is definitely not trivial. So there's a lot of issues on there. So again, there's some great tools inside of ArcGIS for both doing the mapping. The workflows are almost identical. There's still some things that I want to continue to push to have it put in there. For example, things like copying attribution and all of that stuff. But there's it's you can see the potential there. There's a lot of flexibility in how you go and implement ArcGIS. The key to this, and those of you who have come to my workshops and seminars and presentations for the last couple of years know that I keep harping on this. The key to success with the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric is just learning the standard ArcGIS tools. That's really it. You have to learn these tools and know what you have to use and how you use them, because there is an awful lot of flexibility. All right, so let me see here. I think this is it here. So we are now only about 6 minutes away from the end of this presentation, of this workshop. So what I'd like to do is just sort of stop making any more, going over new things, answer any questions. I'd like to open it up, unmute mics. If you have any questions, let's talk about them now, and go from here. All right. So I'm going to start this by saying, on this, is this what you were expecting? And is this enough information? Or did you need more? Was 3 hours enough time, or do you want more? Those sorts of questions. So let's open it up for comments and questions and such. Go ahead. Oh, come on. Nobody? All right.
Frank, this is Joe. I just wanted to say thanks a lot for giving this presentation and covering it. You did a very nice job covering both of those and looking at the pros and cons on that. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's one of those things where until you actually go in and use them side by side and see, I mean, each of these software packages have advantages, but they all also have disadvantages. ArcMap has the advantage in that, and the ArcMap Parcel Fabric in that it is a very mature product. They've taken all those little quirky little things and tried to solve them. But structurally, it has some real problems with it. And those structural problems cause a lot of frustration and consternation for those of us that are still mapping in that ArcMap Parcel Fabric. ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, its strengths are it's a new product. It's a new solution that they're putting together. It may not take care of all the idiosyncrasies, but I can tell you both from what I'm seeing on the development side and the beta testing, there's some amazing things coming on here. And this is a good time to start mapping inside of ArcGIS, whether it's with the parcel fabric or not. Again, the little idiosyncrasies, they're going to get worked out. I'm sure of it. And if they don't work it out, you're going to find business partners like Panda and some of the others working it out on there. So let me see, what else do we have here?
Frank, this is Jason Posier. I would have to add that our journey from classic ArcMap Parcel Fabric to ArcGIS Pro, the things that I've noticed is that the tools are opened up to all of the mechanisms that you have available in ArcGIS Pro. You're not limited, you're not bound by specific tools that were mature in ArcGIS desktop. And you know, that is both good and bad, because depending on who your users are. If they're experienced users of both platforms, that may not be an issue. So if they are very nuanced users or very dedicated users to specific tool sets, they may have a more difficult time kind of understanding, well, why are we doing it this way when we did it the other way? And
why isn't this tool doing both of those things? The other tool uses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, so that's a consideration, but I think largely in our particular setup, it's smooth. It really is smooth. Once you dial that, once you get it into that particular environment that you want to set, for example, our multi-user version database that's feature streaming, it is very smooth. And so those are the considerations, whether you're using just a file geodatabase versus something a little bit more complex like we're using. But again, we're finding that the actual operations and how you connect to that information, how you version and edit that information is very well done.
Yeah, and it's again, because this is sort of a new frontier, getting it into that enterprise solution. There's just little things here that most of us are just beginning to experience, so that, you know, again, this is a more up and coming solution on here, but it works. It works. It just, oh, we have to learn about that, or oh, we have to do that, or I have to make sure that we do that. But I can share with you that right now I just conducted some of my training for Buffalo County, and in order for me to go and work on their data, which was in order to do that inside of ArcMap Parcel Fabric, they had to go and give me a VPN and then give me a user account, and then it was dramatically slow and all sorts of issues. Well, it was a lot easier, and I'm not going to put words in Jason's mouth, but it was a lot easier to get somebody to come in and do the training on that, because there was less inhibitants on there, or less inhibitions. So
thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments or questions for Frank. Are we concluding the Q&A session?
Yes, we are.
I think it is.
Okay.
I think we can. Yep.
All right. Well, I would like to give a huge thank you to Frank and Chris Conkling of Panda Consulting. We appreciate you putting on this workshop for our spring virtual meeting. Thank you to all of our attendees, which at one point numbered at least 50. Our second workshop begins at 1 p.m. with Sarah Rollins and Drew Fioranelli of Datamark. Please tune in at about 12:50 for announcements. If you won't be taking part in this afternoon's workshop, we'd still like to see you at tomorrow morning's session at 8:50 a.m. for opening remarks. After that, they will be followed by the WICD presentation by Melanie Coles and friends, as well as laser scanning and 3D building information modeling by Richard Waller of GPI Geospatial, a platinum sponsor, as well as edge computing in the human sensor by Paul Wickman of Respect. This virtual meeting is free, but if you wish to donate to the WLA Foundation and support the Damon Anderson Memorial Scholarship Fund, you can do so by going to our regional meeting information page at WLA.org and click on the It's for the Kids link on the right-hand side of the page. Thank you, everybody, and tune in later. Jason?
Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you, everybody, for joining our morning workshop session. Please join us for our afternoon session and tomorrow's session starting bright and early. Thank you. Have a good day. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm stopping the recording.